I've done the B4 360mm thing 2 different ways. It's not overly positive experiences, and I didn't think I would do it again so soon. But this time is really different. The third time is really the charm. Welcome to Machines More. I'm a DIY PC enthusiast and a content creator, and I'm inviting you to join the channel here by subbing. And please give a like here if you enjoy this. Big thanks. Today I'm yet again revisiting the Lian Li B4 mini-itx case, although we will strictly be in mini-itx mode for this iteration. So after making one change, the entire 360mm radiator build experience and the thermals changed. It feels like everything changed. Quick refresher, the case comes by default with 2 different types of power supply cages. One is this bigger one, that's this ATX cage that mounts the power supply at the front with the connectors facing the main board panel. This cage can also be mounted on the main board panel to the right of a mini-itx board, but this still isn't as optimal in my last test, just because the placement, cabling can be odd. Within this ATX case, you can then also mount an SFX or SFXL power supply with an adapter plate, but you will still have the dimensional restrictions related to this bigger cage. It's still here, and it's just not space efficient. You also get an SFX cage that is mounted through the slot at the side, and this mounts the power supply between the front of the case and where your motherboard sits. The cables are going to come out downwards, and this is how you would do an SFX or an SFXL power supply when using an mini-itx board, and this is the cage that I used for my first build with a 360mm radiator in this case. But the position and how it choked off and limited the thickness of the radiator was a big problem, as was the fact that you didn't have room to maneuver the radiator when installing, right? Those were problems. I also found the experience to be average with the ITX plus ATX power supply cage mounted sideways. You get a little bit more wiggle room, but the cable management became a headache, and you still have the thermal impact on GPU flow-through sections being choked off in either setup. Either power supply setup in conjunction with the position of the 360mm radiator and its fans would result in there being no place for the exhaust to go, because the SFX cage was covering that flow-through section, and it choked off the thermals. So it choked off the exhaust, so the thermals were less than ideal. This one was just big, and it just has a little channel in between. So either way, I needed high GPU fan speeds to achieve halfway decent thermals. So that's the problem statement. So what if you're running a mini-itx board and an SFX power supply, which actually is a very sensible approach, given that this case's internal dimensions are a lot closer to that of an SFF case. So one of my concerns that I brought up in the initial review was the Lian Li B4 just does not give the user much power supply flexibility. There's no default option to place the SFX power supply flat next to a mini-itx motherboard, even though there would be plenty of space. This is the standard mounting location for cases that's been popularized by the Ncase M1, and that was adapted by the NR200, and I would say this is a very, and probably one of the most logical SFX power supply placements. Because the power supply position is such a sticking point for the 360 experience, I went ahead and I designed a 3D printed power supply cage. Now this was my first iteration. The current one is going to sit a little bit lower, but this is, I have this here for example because that's in the case there. So the 3D printed cage will allow me to place an SFX power supply to the right of a mini-itx board, and this mounts through 3 holes. On the cage, I went ahead and tapped the holes for 632 screws. And if you need longer screws to mount this, which you will, you may already have them because the ones that come with a stock AM5 or AM4 backplate that if you take off that mounting hardware, those will work perfectly. Especially you'll have those screws if your cooler doesn't mount with it, which is actually most coolers nowadays. So if you took that bracket off, you got spare screws, go ahead and use them, right? One version is offset 5mm from the side panel. So in total, there's a centimeter of clearance between the panel and the power supply, and that allows for some very neat and tidy cable management, which is something that I really missed in the stock case. You can also print the flat version of this power supply cage, which would be flat on the backside and then just print the spacers separately, it does make the print a little bit cleaner because you don't have to do supports on this side. So another option, if you are using SFX, is a lower version that lets you place 25mm fans at the top of the case instead of having to only use the slim ones that are included at the top of the case. And there's an SFX L version which will space higher because otherwise it's too low versus the GPU. And that will still allow you to use these stock fans. I will be tweaking this one a little bit as we go, and feel free to chime in with any feedback, but I will go ahead and make this available for all of you if you want to check it out on Printables. It is free for audience members, but if you found it helpful or you found it inspiring, please do consider supporting the channel with the link I'll leave down below. And a big thanks in advance. All right, side note, I printed this in the new Noctua brown filament from Prusa. Big thanks to them for their support. This is the official Noctua PLA filament, the new one, and I gotta tell you, the best part of using this stuff isn't just the fact that you can deck your build out in legit tan and brown shades, but rather this straight up looks like you are printing milk chocolate, and it is super fun to watch it come out of the nozzle. So the power supply bracket does attach pretty securely. Just don't over tighten anything because we are dealing with tap threads and 3D printed material. I was very happy, a lot happier with how the cable sat. It just seemed way more space efficient. And when it came time to install the 360, there was just so much more room to maneuver the radiator that it no longer felt like a Sisyphusian task. And I did experiment with putting the radiator on the outside of the case at first, but it turns out there is actually a physical restriction. The front panel cannot latch in when you have something flush against the hole at the front. So the fans on the outside is still the way to go. But I did switch the radiator position so that the elbows or the fittings were on the motherboard side of the case. And I went ahead and just rotated the tubes up a little bit just to clean things up. And it went together more happily with all these little tweaks, shall we say. If you look from the top with the power supply cage, it's way more open and exhaust has a clear path out. And this was a much more positive build experience compared to the ITX board with the ATX cage. This is the same B850-i from Asus that I did the ATX test with, and the same 5080 Prime OC. I was able to place two OG NFA 12x25s at the top with cages and two G2 12x25s at the bottom. So with a wider channel in between the radiator and the power supply, that should make things much better for both the CPU cooling and the GPU cooling. And when I retested under the same exact parameters, I saw improvement for the CPU heavy temps for the CPU only rendering with the 9950X 3D, which at this magnitude, it indicates to me we fixed something. And it's not just the effect of being able to run the 25mm top fans, right? Because we didn't really change anything else. Switching over to gaming, the gaming temps also improved quite a bit. And I was actually surprised that I saw a bigger improvement on the CPU cooling than the GPU cooling for combined use. So they were kind of both in each other's way with everything spaced tight together. Previously, I needed to have the GPU fans going on this card at 2550 RPM or 84% PWM, which is very loud. And that indicates to me something was not right with the setup. And as mentioned before, it's because that flow-through section was choked off, more so with the default SFX cage combined with the 360 rad. But in the ATX side mount build, it was still not great because there was just more tightness. There was a little bit channel, but there was still pretty tight. So for that reason alone, I wouldn't have wanted to run a 360 with a GPU cooler design like this. It just causes too much conflict. But with the change here, it's much better. And if I drop the GPU fans down to a level that is more reasonable on the ears at 1800 RPM or roughly 62% fans, it's not bad now. It's much easier on the ears, and I'm pretty happy with that. So it's not exceptional, but still better. With the air-cooled setup, the GPU temps were very good because of the more beneficial airflow path, which there it was set up with a rear exhaust helping out the GPU. But for an intaking radiator where you would be prioritizing the CPU performance, this is not bad. And if you're able to print this cage, I could actually recommend that you do this build with the 360 when you use an ITX board and an SFX/SFX-L power supply. I do have a couple more ideas down the pipeline, but next up I am going to share a price to performance video editing setup with the B4. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up soon. And please make sure you check out the links down below if you'd like to support the channel, if you're looking to build, and I'll see you in the next one.